Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Sam's Healing Podcast. My name is Sam. I am overjoyed that you have come to spend time with myself and one of my favorite guests who's become a great friend, colleague, mentor, brilliant therapist, Michael Webb. How are you, Michael?
Doing well. Glad to be here today. How are you?
I'm above average today because we're filming this on a Friday, which I'm super pumped about. It's no longer 115 degrees in Austin, which it's a nice, balmy 60 degrees today, so we feel good. Mm-hmm. And, at the end of the day, I love doing this stuff. I'm thrilled that you're back. I like to have you back as often as possible. And today we're talking about something that's very close to home with me. I know you and your story. It's very close to home for you. How I tee it up for the listener and the viewer is a little bit challenging, but I'm going to try and take a stab at it and you'll fill in the gaps. Today, well, first, because we're always getting new people, why don't you tell everybody what you do, what you specialize in, all the fun stuff?
Okay, so I'm a therapist in Keller, Texas, and I also have an office in Flower Mound, and I do online, virtual therapy. And I work a lot with developmental trauma, which means essentially trauma that affected how we were developed. And that plays very well into the idea of how do you become an addict? How do you become codependent? How do you develop patterns in your life that don't serve you well? And yet you can't break them. Or it seems very difficult to break them. Let's put it that way. It's like I keep shooting myself in the foot, but, I hate this limb.
And what's funny is I've talked to so many people who have listened to you, some of our older videos that we've done and some of the newer ones. And you have a gift because I've had so many people say, Michael Webb put words to my feelings unlike anybody has ever been able to. And it's a gift because you're not just educated. You don't just have letters behind your name. You don't just have decades and decades of experience. You have freaking lived it. You have been through hell. You have been through your own traumas. You have, in the midnight hour, wrestled with the darkness, the demons, the voices, the incredible amount of childhood trauma. And it's one of the reasons I admire you so much is because you have fought your battles and you've won and are winning, because no one ever just arrives, never see a therapist that isn't seeing a therapist themselves. Mm-hmm. And so I'm extremely honored to have you in and to call you a brother. So today we're talking about how we as adults will sacrifice authenticity for attachment, but how it also ties into when we were young, we didn't even know these words, but we had to sacrifice authentic childhood living so that our parents loved us, cared for us, and paid attention to us. Many people call it being parentified, where the parents look to us as children to give them self-esteem, love, acceptance, and equilibrium, when in reality, they should be giving that to us. And so we take these patterns into life where we sacrifice authenticity just to experience attachment, love, belonging, safety. Those are my words. Why don't you break it down on a big word level for how this affects us in our adult life and in our marriages and relationships?
So first off, that is quite an introduction. Holy cow.
I feel pretty proud of it, but there was a lot to say within that little snippet.
So you're amazing as well. I admire and respect you a great deal. And you've been through your own trenches. I mean, that's why you're here. And I think that's why we get each other.
Yeah.
Because, we're veterans in a way of our own fights, our own battles. So when we're a baby, we've all been a baby at least once. We don't know much. We come from this perfect environment to I'm cold, I'm hot, I'm wet, I'm tired, I'm hungry, I'm insecure, I'm afraid. And when someone holds me, when they change me, when they feed me, when they rock me, I feel better. So I want more of that.
Right.
And we immediately begin to recognize, maybe only from a behavioral sense, that I need to be attached to somebody who can do those things for me because I cannot do them for myself. I am utterly dependent. Now, I'm asking a lot of a baby brain here, but if you just recognize that children need security, they need food, they need shelter, they need love, they need nurture, they need guidance. And if they get those things in a predictable fashion, if it's reliable, then we're okay. And it doesn't have to be perfect. But there are some circumstances under which a baby begins to realize very early on, and there have been research to show very early on, like 2, 3, 4 months into life, we're beginning to respond to how our caregivers give their care. And so what we do is we begin to sacrifice being authentic for that attachment. If I get more attention when I giggle than when I cry, I'm a giggle, right? Even if I'm hurt, even if I'm scared, even if I'm sad, I'm going to laugh. I'm going to become what my parents are attracted to because I am desperately in need of them. Now, just by virtue of raising kids, anybody who's raised kids knows that, if you hit your sister with your toy, I'm going to ask you to say you're sorry. And I'm going to want you to act like you mean it, even if you don't.
Right.
I want you to sacrifice authenticity for conformance, which leads to attachment to me, because I'm trying to teach you how to live in society. Okay. But then if I explain later, I know you really weren't sorry, but I also know that you love your sister and you wouldn't want to hurt her and you were really mad. That's providing a debriefing, an understanding that, being authentic means living within your values, caring for the people you love, even if it does mean sacrifice. But we're not talking about that kind of situation. We're talking about a situation where that debriefing, that understanding never happened. And I want you to sacrifice. I need you to sacrifice your authenticity, your needs for my needs as the caregiver. So as this little kid gets older, they're looking at not what do I need, but how can I get at least some of what I need based on how I manipulate the situation, how I alter my behavior to meet what's expected.
That makes all the sense in the world. Because as we get older, we would probably not put verbiage to it, but as we get older, we do this thing called we go along to get along. We comply and resent, because raising a stink or being authentic or using our voice or standing up for ourselves doesn't go well. And if we come from this type of a background, right, we just think it's kind of normal and we're just used to it. But at some level, aren't we self-abandoning or even self-neglecting to experience that attachment?
So here's the insidious nature of the situation, though. Yeah, here's the big words. So let's say attachment is a primal need. And I do something that attaches me as the dependent child. to my parent, no matter how dysfunctional it appears, I'm going to get a hit of dopamine, maybe even some norepinephrine. I'm going to feel better.
Right.
By sacrificing myself.
Right.
So, yeah, I was hungry, but, I ate some crackers and it was good. And I got to snuggle with mom because I didn't ask her for food.
Yeah.
So we begin to alter our reward system. A reward system that's designed to keep us alive. But if my reward system becomes altered to the point where meeting the needs of my caregiver becomes rewarding, even if I'm sacrificing basic needs for myself, I'll do it. And by the time I'm able to become self-aware and begin to ponder these ideas about, am I, neglecting myself? Am I even abandoning myself? Possibly betraying myself? It feels too good to stop. Not much different than an addiction.
It makes all the sense in the world. But what do you do? Because I'm sure there's people listening and people watching going, Michael, absolutely, I get it. But what do I do about it? I'm 40 years old. I'm 30 years old. How do I even start to repair this? Because it's become so ingrained within me. And it's playing out in my relationship or my marriage so much, I don't know how to repair it. I have no idea how to fix this. My husband or my wife, they're acting out continually, having affairs or in an active addiction, and I can't hold boundaries. I keep chasing them or giving them more chances, and they keep betraying me or letting me down. What do they do?
Well, no pressure here.
That's why you're here, buddy.
Okay, pressure. So, step one, the only person, and this is like the terrible truth of adulthood. The only person that can save you is you. And you cannot save someone else and save yourself at the same time.
Say that again, because you taught me something, and I literally read it to people all the time, because one day you and I were talking and I took notes and I said, all the while when we're trying to repair trauma, we're trying to repair wounds, we're looking for this therapist, we're looking for our spouse, our partner, our affair partner, we're looking for someone to rescue us. But at the end of the day, the only people that can rescue us is ourselves. Now, for some that come from faith, that's really hard, because we are taught in faith that we cannot rescue ourselves. But I want to speak to that from the faith component and say, no one can save us if you come from faith and subscribe to the Christian faith, Jesus. No one can do that for us. We cannot save ourselves in our own salvation and make up our own religion. However, we can show up for ourselves, because while Jesus may command us to do some things, we still need his grace, but we still have to do it. Jesus doesn't magically give you a Bible and go, here you go, my son or daughter, read it. He doesn't magically take you to church. We still have to have initiative and we still have to do things. But the fact is, us showing up for ourselves, healing ourselves, doing work to rescue ourselves is a life-changing revelation.
Mm-hmm. So, it's I've got a couple of thoughts here, and I hope you like both of them.
Okay.
One of them is, from the Christian perspective, you only get to the Father from the Son. From a psychological perspective, you only heal the child through the adult. See, as we grow and we become an adult and we become self-aware, that child is still there. The inner child, colloquially understood by most people now as who we used to be.
Right.
But that kid has learned very primal lessons about survival and will flood us with emotions that are intense, extreme, in very benign situations simply because they resemble what happened in the past. And we forget in that moment, I'm a grown up.
Right.
I can take care of myself. I do not need another person to keep me safe, to keep me fed, to keep me clothed, to keep me warm. I can do that. And so,
but
Mhm.
we become codependent when we think that we need a person to constantly do that for us, right?
Oh, codependency. You use the word. So let's say that I discover as a child, because my parents are alcoholic. We'll just make it simple. And what they need from me several days a week is to become needless.
Right.
I make my own dinner. I do my own homework. I do my own bath. I put myself to bed. And they appreciate it. And if I actually ask them for something, I become an imposition, which, by the way, every time I start to section a part of myself off, my authentic self, I put it into the shadow. I repress it. And this uncomfortable thing happens when I repress something. It's now a secret. There's a part of me that people shouldn't see. The part of me that needs a hug before I go to bed. The part of me that needs reassurance when I'm not comfortable with that test I'm going to take tomorrow. Or that bully in school that I'm going to have to face. And I really needed to talk to somebody about them, but I'm going to have to deal with them on my own. Well, the kid, as a relatively egocentric being, will think, if my parents believed I needed that support, that guidance, that strength, they would have given it to me. So I must be weak or damaged or wrong in some way to act like or feel like I need it. And so we begin to feel this chronic, toxic shame. Now, I'm just meandering around here regarding what do I do about it? But part of it is recognizing that the adult that's made a life, that is capable of caring for you, is capable of caring for that child.
It's a brilliant thought. I mean, when you were just right now itemizing out how we section, I've known you, I don't know, it feels like a couple of Old Testaments and New Testaments long. I never talk to you without taking notes, because when you say things like we section parts of ourself off and we repress it, and it's now a secret part of me I shouldn't share, like it brings up palatable emotions in me of how I shut parts of myself off because I just felt like, no, I'm not worthy of these parts being seen. I need to go along to get along. I need to section those off, because if I show those parts, or when I've showed those parts, my family treated them very harshly. My parental figures shamed me. I felt shame. So I buttoned myself up. I shut it down. I locked it away and said, no, I'm just going to go along. I'm just going to keep going. And I repressed so much anger and so much resentment. Mm-hmm. And I had this opinion of myself locked away that I was just a complete failure and screw up. And it continued to play out in my life. But it's unfortunate that you come along and you hear these things and you go, what? Hold on. I became needless and wantless in order to feel love and acceptance. I sacrificed my authenticity for attachment. It's heartbreaking. It really is. Like, for the listener, the viewer, guys, it's heartbreaking what we do to ourselves to survive. It is gut-wrenching how we will straight abandon ourselves to just survive. It is gut-wrenching. It brings me to a palatable sense of grief for what I did to myself and what we do to ourselves.
Yeah.
So when we do this, we come to a point, we find someone like you, we hear a podcast like this, and we go, oh, That's deep. What do we do next? I interrupted you because you said something so great, but you said step one, keep going. I mean, it's brilliant stuff.
Most of us, you and me included, recognizing that if people really knew me, they wouldn't like me, they wouldn't trust me, they wouldn't hire me, and they sure as hell wouldn't love me.
Right.
So I'm going to perform everywhere all the time. And when I do that, I'm always alone just a little bit because I have judged part of me unworthy of the light of day, unworthy of being seen, of being touched, of being loved, of being cared for. In fact, I may even be ashamed of it, my needs. Wow, I get hungry whenever I haven't eaten and I feel bad about it. Say I only eat alone. That sounds like an extreme example, but I've heard it.
Yeah. That's why we don't, I shut down my emotions for so long because I thought, dude, if I talk about that, I'm going to be seen as soft. I'm going to be seen as a wimp. I can't trust anybody with that vulnerability. Oh, by the way, I shared a little bit of vulnerability or I messed up and I was abandoned and obliterated by everyone close to me. We're not going to do that ever again, right?
Oh, of course not. Because the thing is, if I learned something that kept me alive, it requires a tremendous amount of mental energy to say, yes, that kept me alive. It kept me safe as a child, as a dependent child. I am no longer a dependent child. But the child in me is dependent on something, on someone. And if it's my partner, even my boss, friends, a preacher, somebody on, it doesn't really even matter who it is. That child believes I can't rely on myself. I have to subject myself to whatever conditions that exist with the person providing me security.
So no boundaries, no self-respect.
None. And here's where I probably make people maybe mad, but I know that if I manipulate the circumstances, I'm in control of the person who thinks they're in control of me. Relationships become a chess game.
Right. No authenticity. We are just, and whenever we say the word manipulate, I want everybody to understand it's a harsh word, but the fact is it's a survival tactic. It's a maladaptive coping mechanism. It's a way that we make sense out of life because we are scared to death. Is that fair?
Oh, yes. I mean, when we, people say, power, knowledge is power. But truth of the matter is, we gain knowledge when we don't have power. And knowledge.
How so?
Well, if I don't know how to change a tire, then I research it on the internet. I gain knowledge, then I can change the tire. I gain the power through having the knowledge.
Yeah.
But with a child, children know they're powerless. Children know they're dependent. And so manipulation is not the sense of like a narcissistic sort of thing where I'm going to elicit a response from you that's going to feed my ego. This is still about, I just don't want to die. I just don't want to be abandoned. I'm terrified to be alone. If you reject me, it's because I did it wrong, because I am wrong. And that's
exactly it. Yep.
Keep going. The problem is that as an adult, when you apply this prefrontal cortex to that survival mechanism, it can get ugly because codependency is not just about long suffering. It's about managing an addict. It's about creating situations and circumstances under which I'm still in control of this uncontrolled person. Whether they're having an affair, they're a sex addict, they're an alcoholic, drug addict, gambling addict, or maybe they spend 90 hours a week at work. But I make sure, when they get home, that they get a pat on the head and some food, and I reward them for that behavior because, I'm taking care of them, right? And then I can complain about how much they're at work.
Yeah. So we are managing the situation and we like to put ourselves as the victim, even though we're still actively trying to manipulate the situation.
And we may not know.
We may not know. Okay.
We may not know that we're manipulating. It's more like I'm dealing with the situation as it presents itself. Come on, Sam. I mean, what am I supposed to do? I've got kids.
Right.
I'm a stay-at-home dad. If I lose her income, I'm on the street.
So with the person that's sitting here going, okay, Michael, you got me. Okay. How do I begin to take steps to get healthy? How do I begin the process? We both know, I've got clients, you've got clients. We both know it's a process and the power is in the process, and there is no magic wand. There is no Men in Black, bink. It just doesn't work that way. But for the person that's sitting here going, okay, you got me. I get it. I subscribe to this. What are a couple of steps? What's the first step that they can take to start to really come out of the fog and attempt to get healthy?
So what I've been talking about in terms of like trying to explain different scenarios or circumstances is essentially describing the first step, which is developing a sense of awareness and acceptance. I am doing this. I am responding to childhood trauma. I am playing the role that I was relegated to when I was 4. And a lot of the pain and a lot of the fear that I feel like is coming from my spouse. No, they're just triggering what was already there. And as much as I want to blame them, I need to accept responsibility for what I'm doing as an adult and recognize that this kid in me has always needed an adult's love and protection, and I'm the only one who can do it. So that involves boundaries. I'm not going to accept certain behavior. I'm not going to tolerate being treated this way, and I'm not going to enable it to occur. So in this case of an alcoholic, I'm not going to call into work for you. If you lose your job, you lose your job. Or I'm not going to bail you out of jail. Or I'm not going to ignore that text that I saw on your phone. I know you're cheating, but I'm not going to say anything because I need you for survival. No, I'm an adult.
Yeah.
I have needs, I have rights, I have responsibilities, and one of them is to care for me. So awareness, and then setting boundaries from that awareness.
Do you think also I can see someone like me decades ago listening to this and going, he's so right. I'm so stupid. I'm just a mess. Like, I have to think that so many people do not remember the beautiful concept of self-compassion, even if you're manipulating, even if you're doing this stuff. I say it this way: you can never shame yourself into healing. You can never shame yourself into freedom, right? Isn't there also a little bit of understanding, like, you've got to be compassionate on yourself? You've got to understand that this behavior doesn't come from a willful anger. This comes from trauma, right?
Yes. And there's compassion for you. But the thing about it is, though, I can't just be compassionate for me. Yes, I'm responding to childhood trauma. There's a kid in me that is desperate for security and love and acceptance. And the addict or the unfaithful or the workaholic that I'm married to, they've got a kid inside them just like mine. And those two kids know how to have this relationship. They saw it. It was patterned for them. It was played out throughout their childhood. And we couldn't have done any different until we became aware of what we were doing. So no, blame isn't going to help. Shaming isn't going to help. Judgment isn't going to help, but awareness will. Awareness along with the compassion that if I'm going to change this, if I'm going to do something different, I have to be aware that what I was trying to do was fight for my life.
Yeah.
That's what I started out doing.
That's absolutely right. And when you see it from that perspective, excuse me, you're able to give yourself compassion and go, I've got to forgive myself for what I did not know, because I keep looking at myself this way with this heavy-handed shame and oppression and judgment. And I'm never going to set myself free if I stay locked in that prison. And you have dropped nuclear bombs of information and freedom today. So for those that might be new, or for those that haven't acted upon it, if they want to reach out to you, if they want to find more from you, if they want to even consider a session, how do they find you? How do they reach you?
Well, if you look up Michael Webb, LPC, in Keller or Flower Mound, you'll find me. Through Psychology Today, I don't have my own website. And just send me a message. Text is better. I will respond. My schedule is pretty busy, kind of rigid at this point, but I promise you I will respond. And if I can't help, I'll find somebody who can. Could I add one thing?
Absolutely.
So you can't do this alone. I'm describing this as if I can mentally just recognize I'm an adult. I can do this. I can love this kid inside of me. The reality is you need somebody to model that love for you. And that can come through a therapist or a support group, Al-Anon, ACOA, other different types of therapies. I tend to use emotional transformation therapy and EMDR and transactional analysis. However, there are many different ways to do the same thing. But trying to do it alone places you in the position that you've always been in, which is being alone and figuring it out on your own.
Right.
And we got to take the Christmas lights out of the closet, bring them into the front yard before we can untangle them.
It's such a great point, and I love it. And, for those of you that are watching or listening, I plead with you to reach out for help from Michael, reach out to myself, find someone who can help come alongside you. Because regardless of if you're an unfaithful or a betrayed, maybe you're an addict, maybe you're still involved in your affair or in active addiction, you are worth the time and the effort to get healthy. You are worth the time and the labor and the finances and the sacrifice to rescue yourself and to give other people opportunity to come alongside you and be part of the team. Because everybody has to have a care team. Everybody has to have a care team. It could be a couple of people, it could be multiple people, but trying to do it on your own doesn't work. Michael and I both know that because we tried. And you ask anybody who's a clinician, coach, position of authority that helps other people, and they'll tell you, you can't do it alone. You just can't. You can do it wrong, and you can mess a whole lot of stuff up, but you can't do it right by yourself. So as always, thank you for tuning in. Michael, again, it goes without saying, you're the man. Thanks for coming in. If you want to reach out to me, you can reach out to me at samshealingpodcast@gmail.com or leave a note or a comment wherever you're watching. Michael, you gotta come in again soon to talk more about this, but thanks as always.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's always an honor. Take care.